We're tracking two systems, including Tropical Storm Gonzalo in the Atlantic now, but heading our direction with the latest models pointing to Gonzalo reaching hurricane strength. Our meteorologists are live on Tracking the Tropics with the latest projections and to answer your questions here live. Hey there, everybody. JB Buno here with you live in our hurricane headquarters in Tampa, Florida. In the bottom right-hand portion of your screen, we're going to get to Gonzalo and Invest 91L here momentarily, but we want to let you know we're going to be doing an interactive Q&A. You at home can ask your questions to our trio of meteorologists on your screen. Ian Oliver, Julie Phillips from WFLA on the top, and then joining us from WGNO, Chief Meteorologist Hank Allen. If you want to ask a question to one of the meteorologists on your screen, use the hashtags under their names. Hashtag Hey Julie, hashtag Hey Ian, hashtag Hey Hank. In about 5, 6, 7 minutes time, we'll be getting to the Facebook Live comment section and taking those questions and asking them specifically to our meteorologists. But a lot to get to on this edition of Tracking the Tropics, everybody. Tropical Storm Gonzalo could be the first hurricane of the 2020 hurricane season. And Invest 91L right now in the Gulf. To get to the very latest, we start with Tracking the Tropics meteorologist Ian Oliver, joining us from home, social distancing, and talking about Gonzalo and all the action surrounding it. Hey there, Ian.
Hey, JB. Yeah, Gonzalo forecast to become our first hurricane of the season. In editions past of Tracking the Tropics, we've been talking about the record fast start to this tropical season. We had our earliest 6-name storm of the season, and then yesterday we had Tropical Depression 7 develop. Early this morning, a special bulletin from the National Hurricane Center came at about 10 of 9, so maybe not that early this morning. That gave us our 7th-name storm of the season, which also broke a record. Old record for the 7th-name storm was Gert back on July 24th of 2005. And of course, to say 2005, that's never the season that you want to reference. That was the Greek alphabet year. We had 27 storms, 15 hurricanes in the 2005 season. So an active start to our season, just slightly quicker than that. It doesn't say what's going to happen from here on out. But yes, our average first hurricane, that doesn't happen until August the 10th. So we're well ahead of schedule in terms of named storms and perhaps what'll be our first hurricane of the season. So this is Tropical Storm Gonzalo. What you're seeing is the latest information from the National Hurricane Center. It's motion to the west at 14 miles per hour. Maximum sustained winds right now around 50 miles per hour. So this thing has been ramping up over the course of the day today. It's a tiny tropical system, a peanut. Its tropical storm force winds only extend out about 25 miles from its center of circulation. So the small nature of the storm, that's a little bit problematic in terms of the forecast from here, and we'll get much more into that coming up. But let's show you the forecast cone. This, again, is the latest update from the National Hurricane Center that came out at 11 a.m. And you notice in the short term, that's where the intensification is in the forecast. We're thinking this is likely going to become a Category 1 hurricane by tomorrow, by Thursday, and you see that forecast track taking it westward towards the Windward Islands and then eventually into the Eastern Caribbean. And if you look at the updates and the icon, you can see how the system is forecast to weaken as it enters the Eastern Caribbean. And there's a reason for that. The forecast from the National Hurricane Center, keeping in mind the amount of dry air and wind shear. We've been talking about Saharan dust for months. We had that monumental plume earlier this season that came off the coast of Africa. That could be our saving grace as we head towards the weekend when the system emerges into the Eastern Caribbean and it has to deal with some of that wind shear. It has to deal with some of that very dry, warm, and very stable air. So that could inhibit further development long term. So this graphic kind of shows you that. Short term, conditions are good. We've got plenty of moisture in the short term, a lower shear environment, tiny compact system. Once it enters the Eastern Caribbean, that's when there are a little bit more question marks. But further adding to the question marks is the tiny nature of this storm system. Very compact. Hasn't been around for very long. That's a challenge for forecast models. Sometimes dry or tiny compact circulations can fight off a dry air a little bit better. So that's what we're going to have to watch long term, Julie. But there are certainly some factors in the short term that help this thing intensify. And then long term, thankfully, we got some things helping us out, weakening the system in the Eastern Caribbean. Julie?
Absolutely, Ian. So I know a lot of us right now, we're not wanting to, it's a little early in the season to have to be worrying about having a hurricane. A lot of people want to know exactly where the storm is going. But like you said, there is a lot working for this storm or against the storm in the long term. So just taking a look at a few of the things. So right now, the structure of the storm, it is a very compact storm, but its structure is all right now. And in the short term, you can see it strengthening into a hurricane. But as we head toward the weekend, as it moves into the Caribbean, this is going to be facing a lot of dry air. Now, hurricanes need moisture in order to fuel them. So when we have dry air, that's really going to limit the strengthening of a system and long-term will erode a system. You just saw that Saharan dust graphic, and that shows you as we head into the weekend. Right now, the forecast is for a good bit of that dry and dusty air to kind of be right over this potential system. So that's one thing that is going against Gonzalo at this point. We also not only just have the drier air, but we also have the potential for some wind shear as well to kind of impede on the development of this system. It's not expected to interact with much land, so that's something that, you know, this system doesn't have to worry about. Like I said, the structure's okay. The water is plenty warm already, but it's mainly, I think, that dry and dusty air. So we head into the long term. By the end of this weekend, you can see our models, our spaghetti model plot, really through the next several days, a high level of certainty on where this storm is going. So as we head into the weekend, you can see pretty much all of our models are bringing in this due west, basically due west, northwest, and into the Caribbean as we do head into this upcoming weekend. So some high levels of certainty there. As we head into the weekend, we get pretty far out, and that's when we start to see some of the models really kind of dissipating the system. So we'll have to see. And this is just one of the systems that we're watching out there right now. Currently, we're seeing some heavy rain in Florida, all thanks to a tropical wave that we're watching. And Hank, you actually will probably see even more of this deep moisture as we head through this week.
Yeah, this wave moving through the Gulf right now, Invest 91L as we're calling it, is definitely showing some better signs of organization. It has looked a lot more impressive through the morning. You've seen that flare up of thunderstorm activity near and east of the center, certainly. And you can see on the radar there, as you mentioned, this is a widespread rainmaker all the way to the east coast of Florida at this point, as the past few Gulf systems have been. Of course, the past couple have been very spread out to the east. Latest update from the Hurricane Center does really raise that chance now to a high probability that this is a classified system. And remember, that just means potentially a tropical depression. When they say that, it doesn't necessarily mean a named storm, although I think what we probably see over the next couple of days here is this classified as a depression and then probably in the western Gulf before making landfall in Texas. You probably reach a named storm, which would be Hannah, as it moves coastal areas there of Texas towards the Houston area. And I tell you, it's a really weird setup here as this moves in across the northern Gulf, both for the Louisiana coast and also eastern Texas, which has seen a lot of rainfall over the past couple of weeks, obviously. You know, some models indicating that maybe we see a little piece of this system split off, or you get sort of a secondary low that forms around the northern Gulf. So, you know, for my forecast purposes here, even as that is moving inland by Saturday, I think we're going to see a lot of rainfall continuing probably across the northern Gulf, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, probably all the way into early next week. And so we're looking at the potential for several rounds of heavy rain, the potential for a little bit of flooding issues maybe, depending on where the heaviest rain sets up. So, you know, not major impacts in terms of wind or storm surge from this most likely, but definitely a big rainmaker, Ian. And, you know, we'll have to keep watching this to see how much it develops over the next few days.
Yeah, certainly be interesting to see what becomes of it, depression or a named storm, as you mentioned. Should point out, in an average year, that would be our 8th named storm. We're talking about Hannah. We have Gonzalo now. In an average year, we don't see our 7th named storm until September the 16th. So that kind of just gives you a little bit of a scope on how far ahead of schedule, a couple months, we've seen these named storms kind of one after another. This is where we typically look for systems in the month of July. We have been a few weeks ahead of schedule, so to see a tropical storm like Gonzalo that's developed in the tropical Atlantic, the main development region, that's a feature that we typically maybe second week of August, where we're more looking for tropical waves emerging off the coast of Africa and then moving across the Atlantic. But again, everything has been a little bit ahead of schedule this year, so that's certainly not too surprising to see that happening. Those are your development regions. As I mentioned, you're still looking for warm water in July. That eastern part of the Caribbean is a likely area of development, but thankfully, as Julie pointed out, that's likely where Gonzalo runs into some of that dry air and added wind shear, 20 to 25 miles per hour of wind shear, which should start to push on that system and really make it difficult for it to maintain its structure. So this is the list, which we've been crossing names off this list at a pretty feverish pace so far. Hannah would be the next one on the list, as we mentioned. So it's been an active start to the season. We've got two areas we're watching. One, a tropical storm already forecast to become our first hurricane of the season. And we've got another invest that's looking a whole lot better on satellite and radar this afternoon, JB. Maybe eventually our 8th named storm of the season.
Ian Oliver, Julie Phillips, Hank Allen, our 3 meteorologists here on your screen. As a reminder, everybody, we're about 90 or so seconds away from doing a live meteorologist Q&A. You can use the hashtags that you see on your screen, and you might see it also in the pinned comment on Facebook Live. If you want to ask a question, whether it's related to Gonzalo, whether it's related to the 2020 hurricane season or Invest 91L that Hank was just talking about, the two systems that we're tracking here, or if you just have a question about hurricanes or tropical development in general, we're going to be looking for your questions, but only the questions with the hashtags that you see on your screen. Hashtag Hey Julie, hashtag Hey Ian, and hashtag Hey Hank here in the Facebook Live comment section. So if you have a question for a meteorologist, we're about 90 or so seconds away from gathering them out of the Facebook Live comment section. But really quickly, you guys, as far as what we expect in the days ahead with Tropical Storm Gonzalo, we are projecting Cat 1 strength here, right? We are talking about a hurricane, Ian?
Yeah, that is the latest forecast from the National Hurricane Center. So don't be surprised, even as early as this evening, tonight, early tomorrow, you see a bulletin that says Gonzalo reaches hurricane strength. In the short term, there's really not a whole lot to inhibit development of this system. It's in a low shear environment. We talked about the above average sea surface temperatures in the Atlantic Basin this year. That's all good for Tropical Storm Gonzalo. And then you throw in the fact, as I mentioned, this is about as compact as a tropical system gets. Tropical storm force winds that only extend out 25 miles from that center of circulation. It's very, very small, and small cyclones have an ability to rapidly strengthen. They can also diminish quickly. So that's what we're going to be looking for in the short term. How good does this system organize itself? How potent can it get? Because longer term, that would likely help the system shield itself a little bit, at least, from that wind shear and some of that dry air in the Saharan air layer that's forecast to move off to its north and then eventually kind of catch up with it as it starts to gain a little bit of latitude. South of 10 degrees north right now. So this is pretty low in latitude. It'll eventually start to wobble a little bit farther off to the north. And as it does so, JB, that's when it runs into a little bit more of that dry air and wind shear.
And here on Tracking the Tropics, of course, we'll be keeping you posted every step of the way with our meteorologists from across the United States joining us here on this program to keep you alert, aware, educated on everything happening in the 2020 hurricane season. That brings us to our interactive Q&A, folks. If you've been here with us on the program before, you know how this works. Use the hashtags on your screen, hashtag Hey Ian, hashtag Hey Julie, hashtag Hey Hank, and we'll take your questions out of the Facebook Live comment section and ask them to our meteorologists. And we begin with the very first one coming in, and it's on the WFLA Facebook page from Damaris Barreto, hashtag Hey JB, and I'm not going to answer it. I'm going to leave it for our meteorologist to answer this question, but I'll throw it right over to Julie for this one. Hashtag Hey JB. Is Tampa going to see this hurricane? Talking about Gonzalo here. Julie.
Thanks, JB. Well, I certainly hope Tampa does not see this hurricane. I think we can all be in agreement on that at this point. And in terms of where the storm is headed, if you looked at the track earlier, the spaghetti models, our models are all in pretty good consistency that this storm is headed into the Caribbean as we head into this weekend. And then it really has a lot facing it. So we'll have to see if this storm even survives moving west, northwest through the Caribbean before we would even know in the long term if it may affect places like Central America or if it may move into the Gulf. It's really too early to tell that just yet, because after we head into late this week and early next week, like I said, it's facing a lot of dry air, and that could shred the system apart. So we'll have to just see if it even makes it. Right now, here in the Tampa Bay area, we are not overly worried about the system. But of course, we're going to keep our eye on this and continue tracking it for you as it moves moves ahead and west through this weekend.
Thanks, Julie. Chief Meteorologist Hank Allen joining us from WGNO in New Orleans. We're going to throw him a bit of a curveball. Of course, he's focused on Louisiana weather, but we're going to ask him this question coming in from Georgia. Nicole Adside from WSAV's Facebook page in Savannah, Georgia, asking about whether or not either of these two systems, I would imagine, Gonzalo or Invest 91L, heading Savannah, Georgia's way. Hank?
Well, certainly not the Invest 91 in the Gulf. That's headed to Texas. Pretty good agreement on that. You know, Gonzalo is really interesting, as we've been talking about here. As Ian mentioned, it's a very small, compact system. And a lot of times you don't want storms to get real big because they grow in intensity. This is the interesting system, and we mentioned this earlier, where if it does get a little bit bigger in size, it has a better chance to probably ingest some of that dry air, some of that dust layer that we're talking about, and eventually weaken. And I think there's two camps here at the moment. And if you look at the intensity plots of the forecast models, they're sort of in agreement of the same thing. Some of these take this, there's a grouping that takes this system up to Category 3, Category 4 strength. There's another grouping that drops it back down to sort of a tropical storm, tropical depression, and as Julie mentioned, just sort of dissipating. And for my purposes at this point, it's way too early to tell where this thing is going. So really trying to put any sort of answer on this is probably futile, but we're here to answer questions, so we'll do it. For my purposes, if this does maintain its intensity and get to Category 2 or so, maintain that structure, I do think you have a better chance to see it curve north, potentially impacting the Gulf of Mexico or, maybe up the East Coast. I think Savannah's unlikely at this point, but a weaker system, I feel, would probably continue to venture farther west, maybe into the Gulf, maybe into Central America, and from that point. So we're still talking about 7 to 10 days here to watch this. Way too early to make a call, but it's a really interesting system in the sense that, the size is really going to play a role on how this maintains or doesn't maintain intensity and where it goes from there.
I gotta ask this follow-up question here. I was gonna get to another one, but this one is just too good, and I think we're all deserving of a little bit of a laugh, right? Everyone up for a little bit of a laugh here, everybody, because this next question, it does come in for Chief Meteorologist Hank Allen, again joining us from WGNO in New Orleans, Louisiana. And I just want to make sure that I have this comment coming in here correctly, and I do. Okay, it's from Peggy on the WFLA Facebook page. Peggy LaSala in Tampa, hashtag Hey Hank. What about Hudson? Is it gonna hit Hudson? I've got to get my dog's nails clipped. So Peggy here is wanting to know if this storm is gonna impact the ability for her to get her dog's nails clipped, and she's asking about Hudson, Florida, which of course is north of Tampa here on the Gulf Coast side of Florida. But Hank, I couldn't resist.
You got to. That is funny. First off, Peggy, clip away. I mean, like I said, we're talking 7 to 10 days here before any potential U.S. landfall. And like I said, I'm not going to write off the potential of this impacting somewhere in the Gulf of Mexico. It's just too soon. It's way out there. It's still way east of the Antilles. But if you got an appointment at the groomer over the next 7 to 10 days, I think you'll be okay with that. So knock it out now and be ready just in case.
Peggy, we are thinking of you and making sure that you feel like you can safely get your dog's nails clipped. I think we're all in unison here. Our meteorologists are in unison that is, we can give you a thumbs up on that one. Ian Oliver, Julie Phillips, Hank Allen joining us here, taking your hashtag comments here in the Facebook Live comments section. Let's get to the next one here, everybody, and it comes in from WFLA in Tampa. Again, it's a hashtag Hey Ian comment. This one kind of interesting, and I don't know how you want to treat this one, Ian, as far as your response. But Donna Freeborn from WFLA's Facebook page in Tampa, hashtag Hey Ian, do hurricanes keep the African dust away?
It's kind of the other way around. It's the reverse of that, Donna. The dust oftentimes helps inhibit hurricane development. So that's what we're talking about when we get towards the Eastern Caribbean over the weekend, as this system really starts to encounter. There are a number of issues with Saharan dust for hurricanes in the mid-levels of the atmosphere, really from about 5,000 feet up to 20,000 feet. You're talking about very warm and very dry air. It's stable, and it has a lot of wind shear that's associated with it. So as a hurricane is trying to organize itself, it's getting pushed on essentially by those higher winds a little bit upstairs in the atmosphere, and it can't organize itself vertically. Also, it has a lot to do with that dry air. And as Julie mentioned, it's moisture where hurricanes get their energy from, specifically from sea surface temperatures, but eventually some of that evaporation into the air above it. That water vapor condenses into cloud droplets. Heat is released, and then this whole system starts cooking. Dust is very disruptive to that process. So we typically root for Saharan dust. I know some people in sensitive groups have some sinus issues related to that. Where we want the dust is where we're seeing these systems try to develop in the tropical Atlantic. We've seen that a couple of really impressive plumes already this year, and that's helped to shut down some tropical activity. So we're hoping with this system that Saharan dust eventually helps to weaken the system. And as Hank mentioned, a number of forecast models. I know typically in the comment section we start getting questions about the GFS, the Euro. The global models, most of those projecting that Gonzalo dissipates through the central and eastern part of the Caribbean, and it would be because of those factors, dry air and wind shear, that really would help to tear up the system. So that's, of course, what we're hoping for to happen, but we're talking about a system that's 1,200 miles off to the east of the Windward Islands, way in the middle of the Atlantic. As Hank said, it's way too early to say where this thing is heading a week and a half, 2 weeks from now, and what it's going to look like at that point in time, JB.
All right, let's get to the next comment here, and it's for meteorologist Julie Phillips from Maggie and Mayfield in the Florida Panhandle from WMBB's Facebook page, hashtag Hey Julie. By when will we know if it's coming to the Panama City, Florida area? PC, Florida, of course, Panama City up there on the Panhandle.
All right, Maggie. Well, I think as we head into this weekend, if you do live in the Gulf Coast, anywhere, not just Panama City, I think that's when we kind of look at things, we'll have a better idea of what the system is doing. We'll see how much the dry air is affecting it, how strong it is at that point, to see if it would maybe carry on west into Central America or curve north if it holds together. So I'd say probably, again, sometime around this weekend, we'll start to have a better idea of where this system is headed. It's still a long ways away right now. It's not even into the Caribbean yet. So it's got to get there first. We got to see what the dry air is going to do to see if it holds together or strengthens if it's not impacted as much by that dry air, and then see if it does make that curve to the north. So it's not out of the question that you could be impacted by the storm, but right now we just got to wait and see. It's pretty early on. So I'd say by this weekend we'll start to have a better idea.
I'm sensing a theme here, a little early on here, as far as determining whether or not it's going to hit your city or your state or your region of the country. Of course, that's what everybody worries about, is whether or not it's going to hit Tampa or Savannah, New Orleans or Austin or Houston or El Paso. We'll, of course, keep you posted here on Tracking the Tropics. Getting to the next question, everybody, and it's for meteorologist Ian Oliver from Kristen Conley Richardson from Wavy's Facebook page in Virginia. Hashtag Hey Ian. How would this affect transatlantic travel by Sunday?
All right, by Sunday, my guess is, unfortunately, with everything going on, that there not a lot of cruising happening. So my guess would not be that this would be a ship in the Eastern Caribbean. Air travel, absolutely no impact. As we talked about, for the time being at least, sometimes we see tropical systems that are very, very compact, tiny circulations. That's what we have with this one. As I mentioned, a tropical storm force winds only extending out about 25 miles from the center of circulation. So you double that for a diameter, you're talking about winds in a 50-mile span or so. That can and will, if conditions were favorable for development, broaden on out. We saw a storm like Dorian. That was a very compact circulation when that developed. Not to equate these at all, just talking about early structure of a tropical system that eventually broadened out to be a much larger storm. That's likely not going to happen in the short term, especially not in the long term with this, because of all the factors that we mentioned. So we're talking about minimal impacts, minimal disruptions for any travel with this one, JB. And you should point out, JV, before we get going eventually, it's meteorologist Julie Phillips' birthday, special edition of Tracking the Tropics today.
Look at that. I like that. Julie, I did not know that, so that's news to me here as well. So everyone here, you know what? I can hit the, I believe I have the big applause button. There it is, a big applause for Julie's birthday. Everybody in the comment section, why don't we all wish Julie a happy birthday here? I'll try to read some names here maybe towards the end of the program. We got just a couple more questions here coming in actually for Chief Meteorologist Hank Allen joining us again from New Orleans, everybody. And Hank, you were talking about Texas earlier and about how 91L is likely going to be dumping some precipitation on Texas. Well, this one coming in from Joanne Curry Reeves from KXAN's Facebook page in Texas. Austin, Texas, in need of rain, according to Joanne. Will we see some this weekend? Hashtag Hey Hank.
Hey, Joanne. Yeah, I think you have a pretty good chance of at least some rain. I would say right now the heaviest activity probably looks a little bit east of Austin, along I-10 over through the eastern part of the state towards Beaumont, Lake Charles, on over even towards where I am here, southeast Louisiana. But look, this thing's going to move inland around Houston, most likely between Houston and Corpus Christi, I would say right now. And then most likely lift off to the north gradually at some point after that. So I think you got a pretty good chance of getting some of that rainfall that you're looking for out there. And really continued chances even after that. It looks like we stay a little bit soggy across most of eastern Texas, Louisiana, those areas even after this thing moves inland for a couple of days. So probably can help you out a little bit with some of that rainfall here by the weekend and early next week, JB.
Everybody, stay tuned for the days ahead as we continue to track these systems and let you know if it's going to hit your respective area of the country. The final question that we're going to get to from Facebook, guys, I love it when we have kids joining the program or kids sitting down with their parents and watching us here on Tracking the Tropics, because sometimes some of the best questions, some of the funniest questions, they come from kids watching at home, whether it's with their teachers or whether it's with their parents. So this final question that we're going to take here, everybody, is from Sinella Reyes from KXAN in Texas. Hashtag Hey Hank. My girls want to know if the rain from hurricanes are dirty and is it salty? So the girls here for Sinella Reyes from KXAN in Texas wanting to know if the rainfall from hurricanes are dirty and salty. You know, you've been getting the curveball questions today here, Hank, so I'm going to throw you on the spot. I'm going to throw you on the spot here again.
Don't people realize I've been up since 2:30? Too tired to hit curveballs. No, that's a great question. Look, we love when the kids are involved in weather and asking questions and science and all that. So keep plugging along with that, girls. But yeah, you know, it's there is a little bit of extra salinity in hurricane rain, especially over the ocean, of course, because that's where a lot of the moisture is coming from. When you talk about the evaporation of the water content from the ocean, fueling the showers and that sort of thing that produces hurricanes, and the water vapor from the oceans that gets up into the clouds and all that. In terms of the dust, usually not, but of course this year we've got this big African dust layer. We had the modeling earlier that Ian was talking about, and of course we had the show a couple weeks ago when that first really big dust cloud made its way over towards the U.S. and really all along the Gulf Coast, up the East Coast. I mean, everybody was seeing that African dust. There's the chart right there of the forecast model with another big plume or two coming our way here over the next week and a half or so, and you can see that stuff just pouring across the Atlantic and once again reaching the Gulf Coast. So yes, there is a little bit of extra, you know, dirty quality, if you will, with some of the rain, maybe not currently, but as these dust plumes start to make their way in, when you get some of the thunderstorms and showers that pop up within that, it can certainly bring some of that dust down to the surface within the rainfall. You know, you may end up with a little bit of an extra dirt layer on your car, or at least some dirty spots because of the rain, something like that. So we've seen that once so far this summer. We'll see it again over the next couple of weeks as these plumes continue to move across the Atlantic. And, of course, the other impact of that dust layer is a lot of times to limit that Atlantic tropical activity. But, I mean, you know, at the end of the day, it's looking like the lid's going to come off of the Atlantic season here over the next couple of weeks. It's been slow overall. If you think about the Eastern Pacific, we haven't seen hardly anything going on. Usually we see a very active Eastern Pacific if we're seeing a slower Atlantic. So my concern overall is, as we look ahead for the next few weeks, is the fact that the Pacific has been slow. Really everything has been slow, and I think you're going to see the lid come off of that over the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned, follow along, you know, have the hurricane plans in place as we go through the next few weeks, just in case some of these start to approach your area. But, you know, definitely some dusty rain here and there with that dust layer out there, JB.
And to Sinella and her girls watching from, again, from the Texas, from Austin, Texas, I believe, if you're dealing with a major hurricane, if you're dealing with a hurricane, you don't want to find out. You don't want to really walk outside to your front porch and stick your tongue out and try to find out if the hurricane's precipitation tastes salty. Remember, you want to seek hurricane during a shelter, as we're talking here about hurricane preparedness and hurricane education, everybody here, to not just the adults watching at home, but also the kids watching at home on Tracking the Tropics here as well. So, hey, everybody, Again, a reminder, it's Julie Phillips' birthday, and we have a lot of comments coming in. Crystal Bell, happy birthday. Jamie Lewis Underwood, happy birthday. Yoli Maria, Charlie Shepard, Joshua Matta, David Pravat, all saying happy birthday to meteorologist Julie Phillips. So, everybody, the floor is yours, Julie.
Stay at bay, for my.
There you go, everybody. All right, so we got to get going here on Tracking the Tropics. The final comment I'll read is from Vicky Lindquist, #KJB. Thank you for all the updates in Key West. I watch you all the time to see if I need to head north to the mainland. So a lot of folks here watching from home, and a few more comments coming in here. Kim Bloomfield, #Hey Julie, happy birthday. A lot more happy birthday comments I was not able to read. Let's talk really quickly. We'll end out the show talking about Gonzalo and 91L. Any important updates, we'll be back here live on Tracking the Tropics, streaming to apps, websites, and social media platforms across the country. Not just Wednesdays at 2 o'clock Eastern, 1 o'clock Central, but also additional episodes throughout the week as you have major developments with the 2020 hurricane season. If Gonzalo becomes a hurricane, if there's major developments concerning the track shifting, we'll be here live with the latest models, the latest projections, the latest analysis from our team of meteorologists spread out across the United States, everybody, including the meteorologists here on your screen. I can't thank enough WFLA meteorologist Julie Phillips, her birthday again, Ian Oliver, both joining us from home, and then joining us everybody from WGNO, our sister station in New Orleans, Louisiana. Chief Meteorologist Hank Allen, can't thank them all enough. More to come, everybody, in the days and weeks ahead here as we continue to track the 2020 hurricane season. More on Gonzalo and Invest 91L on the app or website associated with this television station's app or their digital presence. So be sure, whatever Facebook page you're watching on, whatever app or website you're watching on, make sure you follow that local television station for all the very latest on where you live. For Ian, Julie, and Hank, I'm JB. Thanks for joining us on Tracking the Tropics. We're back on Wednesday at 2 o'clock Eastern, 1 o'clock Central, or sooner, based on 91L, Gonzalo, and the rest of the tropical activity that we continue to track here on Tracking the Tropics. Farewell, everybody. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for watching Tracking the Tropics.